I am the liaison for planning and zoning, and they are currently working on their 10-year plan of conservation and development, and they have an optimistic date for completion in December of 2006. While the plan was due in 2004, it is a multi-year process to complete. The reason this plan of conservation and development is important is because unless you have it in place, or if a plan is not in place, you can be denied state funding. So I'm glad to see, and I think Russ can attest to it, that some significant work has been is being applied to that.
The basis is extremely simple, and I don't understand why you can't see it. We do not have a new plan. We do not have an amended plan. We have the same thing we've had for the last 14 years. Therefore, we have not updated or made a new plan. So therefore, we are out of compliance. Therefore, that is why I've asked for his dismissal, because we do not have a plan, and there's nothing that's going on here that says we're going to have one.
Hello, everybody. This is Brian O'Haron. We're going to have an interesting program tonight about the P&Z. But first, I thought I'd show you once again. I did this a couple years ago. I'm going to do a shorter version tonight. That's my mother. Born in Malta, came here when she was 2, daughter of a Sicilian father and a Maltese mother. And she, at the age of 65, went down to Cole Park in Torrington, Connecticut, and tripped in a pothole in the park. She broke her leg. Went to the hospital, they bandaged her all up, put her in a cast, and she went home. And the neighbors said, "Why don't you sue the town?" And my mother said, "I'll never sue my town. I'll never sue my town because this is where I came when I was 2. I went through the school system here. I was married here. I've had my children raised here. And my whole infrastructure, family lives here. I will never sue my town." With that, we'll go to the agenda for September 23rd, 2009. I'm going to be talking almost the whole program tonight, pretty much the whole program, about Board of Selectmen, Democratic, Indocrat, Board of Selectmen candidate Clausen suing our town. I'm going to give you Brian's view of that, and I'm going to have an epilogue, what's going on now after these clips you'll see. And if time, and I don't think there's going to be much time, but if there is time, I'll show you the time remaining until the November election, which isn't very far away, November 3rd. And I'll repeat once again my clip of the Democrat selectman Michael Renzullo and his marijuana suggestions to the Board of Selectmen and police chief. We get to that. The Clausen problem. George Clausen was removed for cause from the Planning and Zoning Commission by the Republican selectmen in the year 2008. Clausen elected to have a public hearing instead of a private hearing, and that's okay, no problem with that. About 100 people showed up for it, noisy people, mostly Indocrats and other supporters of the Indocrats and Democrats, and some Republicans and independents there too. Clausen then sued the 5 Republican selectmen and hence the town, because the town is paying for their defense. The 5 Republican selectmen have been the first in many years who voted and lobbied to fund the plan of conservation and development, that's called the P&Z update. There'll be some discussion of the P&Z in these clips tonight, so I'm not going to be defining it here. But the update effort, and stood their ground despite much political pressure and unnecessary abuse from the Indocrats, Democrats, to this day. We will now play some videos of the sequence of major events and later an epilogue and Brian's comments. The first clip will be Barbara Wilkes, an Indocrat who ran on the independent party platform and then switched to unaffiliated and then helped form the Winchester Party that lost big in the next election. She's reporting to the selectmen meeting because she was the interface to planning and zoning, the liaison to planning and zoning. On the POCD expected completion date, on April 17th, that's a very important date, April 17th, 2006.
For Planning and Zoning, and they are currently working on their 10-year plan of conservation and development, and they have an optimistic date for completion in December of 2006. While the plan was due in 2004, it is a multi-year process to complete. The reason this plan of conservation and development is important is because unless you have it in place, or if a plan is not in place, you can be denied state funding. So I'm glad to see, and I think Russ can attest to it, that some significant work has been is being applied to that.
I will now introduce the next clip. That's Bruce Holben, representing Planometrics. They're a POCD design consultant based in Avon. They were presenting to the Board of Selectmen about possible POCD timescales, costs, and other things which we'll play on the next clip. The fellow's name is Bruce Holben.
Experience has been that it takes anywhere between 12 and maybe 18 months to get it done. And the reason that it does take so long is not only do you have to develop all the information that you bring to the commission, but the commission's got other things to do as well. They can't just drop everything and spend all their time working on the plan. We ask when we're involved with towns that the commission devote one meeting a month exclusively to the work of updating the plan. And that's worked pretty well for us. Does it have to be the commission doing all the work? Not really. You can appoint a subcommittee of the commission, not only commission members, but perhaps members of other boards and commissions. And they could, in effect, be the body that does the plan and then presents it to the commission. But the commission is the planning commission is the ultimate authority in terms of adopting the plan. But the idea of a subcommittee is often very appealing to towns in order to free up some of the time of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Depending on the scope of work, a plan that we typically generate for a town has a budget of between $75,000 to $100,000 plus. Things that cause it to be more or less expensive, first of all, mapping. If you don't have mapping in place, that's an extra $20,000 to get it done. I understand that the town is contracted with a nonprofit organization to do the mapping, and that is expected in the very near future, so that would not be an issue. We recommend that a telephone survey be undertaken in terms of getting the public's pulse on important issues. It's really handy to do that because when you get enough evidence that, say, 90% of the public is in favor of purchasing farmland to save it, then that gives you a very good level of comfort when you actually go to do that you've already polled the public and found out this is a good idea from their perspective. It's money well spent. In most of the towns that we do this for, opt to go for this telephone poll that's prepared by a professional organization. The other thing that can add to this are special studies. If there are certain areas of town that need a very intensive look, then that type of scoping would also have to be included. So that's some ideas on the budget.
Okay, the next clip will be Bruce Hoban again, representing Planometrics in the same meeting in his presentation to the Board of Selectmen. But he will be asked some questions by Selectman Capabianca, and this is the discussion that takes place of possible alternative approach to the POCD adoption. And this was in January 2008.
Plan is in conflict with the state plan right now in terms of sewer lines, which are a critical component of the corridor that Jeff is talking about.
Right.
And there's some immediacy to that. That needs something that needs to be taken care of right away. And I think Planning and Zoning Commission has even acknowledged that part of it needs to be done almost immediately. The rest of the plan needs to be updated over time. We've had some very good reviews of our plan from, I forget the guy's name, it came out from one of the NEMO. And he says, we have a very good plan. He likes our plan a lot. He said, obviously, we need some updating here and there. That's why we're in that 10-year update of a 20-year plan. And this issue, the issue that's driving it is the issue of sewer lines, which is sewer and water, which is critical right now. So, I mean, can we gear a plan around focusing on that one portion first and then moving ahead with the rest of the plan over time?
Yeah, I think that's possible, again, with the caveat that you're going to have to do some basic fact-finding up ahead. And then if you want to concentrate on one area to start with, it's doable.
Okay, you're getting to see tonight, retrospectively, a great mayor and a great 5 businessmen, selectmen on the Board of Selectmen. They really did a wonderful job over this with this whole POCD issue, and you're going to see more of it as we go on. We're now going to move to the Board of Selectmen meeting on April 21st, 2008, where the mayor reads a request to remove George Clausen from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Taking office in November, I've made it a priority to attend most, if not all, land use boards meetings, as it was one of our highest priorities to run the town as a business and increase revenues that are desperately needed for this town. One of our major stumbling blocks has been the implementation to update our current plan of conservation and development that was due in 2004. Already 4 years past due and no clear plan in sight, the Republican selectmen have brought forth an amendment to the POCD that would have moved us in the proper direction and allowed the process to move forward and make changes to the plan on a yearly basis rather than waiting 10 years and try to accomplish it all at once. The POCD will never be finished, and it will always be an evolving process. To update the POCD, it has been estimated to cost up to $150,000. This is the first year any funding has been appropriated for the plan, and there may also be some possible grant money from the state. But those grant dollars will be going to towns that are actively working to bring their plan into compliance. On December 20th, 2007, I, along with Selectman Ham, Town Manager Bruce Grezik, Jeff Smith of OPM, Rick Lynn, the Regional Planning Office, Charlie Carno, the Town Planner, and George Clausen and Charles Whalen from the P&Z met to discuss modifications to the POCD. At that time, we were informed by Jeff Smith of OPM that they would not consider a change from rural to growth area because our POCD had not been updated per Connecticut state statutes. Again, this update was due in 2004. Shortly after the December meeting, the Board of Selectmen appropriated $14,750 to Planning and Zoning to begin updating the POCD. We have also budgeted another $15,000 in this year's plan and have applied for the state grant, which we are likely to get between $20,000 and $25,000, if not more. Although we have made efforts to fund the POCD, absolutely nothing has been done to begin with the updates. At this juncture, we are 4 years overdue on updating this development plan, and as businessmen, we see a very disturbing pattern of ignoring critical issues such as the POCD, as well as the OCR violations at Pearson School. Neither of these arose overnight, however. A plan to correct these has fallen on the current board, as no action was taken for the past 4 years. Both of these projects have become extremely costly, and the POCD is a double whammy because it stalls development and it also inhibits revenue growth. These cannot be construed as oversights, but as gross negligence on the part of the boards and commissions involved. Therefore, I strongly recommend that we remove George Clausen from the Planning and Zoning Commission immediately. The time has come to take responsibility and correct some of the inactions that are proving to be very costly to the taxpayers of this town.
Now you will see another clip from the same Board of Selectmen meeting on April 21st, 2008, where Mayor Fracasso explains to the other, mainly the Democratic board members, his version of the removal process.
We have between 5 and 20 days after he receives the letter. Like I said, he'll be receiving that tomorrow in writing as per the charter.
Section 1601.
Section 1601, which I passed out to all of you. So everything is being done above board. And as I stated, they've had ample opportunity. They've done nothing with the funds we've appropriated. You know, their take was that they want to do it all at once, and it's something that is ongoing. This needs to be updated or added to every year, not waiting 10 years and trying to do it all at one lump sum. We do not have the money. That's why we didn't give it to them. They haven't gotten the money in the past. There's no reason to believe that we'll have another $150,000 to give them next fiscal year. And the deadline, where there's absolutely no waivers to be given, and he's been made aware of this, the absolute cutoff date is June of 2010. So we cannot sit idly by and not at least make an attempt to get this done in a business and professional way.
The next clip is very short. Same Selectmen meeting, April 21st, 2008. Board of Selectmen meeting. The 5-2 vote to begin the removal process of George Clausen from Planning and Zoning.
Continued resistance and refusal to upgrade our present plan of conservation and development, which is already years overdue. Number 2, your refusal to accept amendments drafted for you that would have provided necessary changes needed by the State of Connecticut Office of Policy and Management to update the POCD concerning the Aurora Estates development. 3, after your December 20th, 2007 meeting with Charlie Whalen, Town Planner Charlie Carno, Jeff Smith of OPM, Regional Director Rick Lynn, Interim Town Manager Bruce Grezik, Selectman Michael Ham, and myself, I as Mayor at our next Board of Selectmen meeting requested and was granted $14,750 to give to the Planning and Zoning Commission to help stimulate the process to update the POCD. To date, nothing has been accomplished with these funds. 4, the possible financial harm to the town of Winchester by not updating the POCD, most recently warned in a letter from OPM dated April 10, 2008, reminding the town of potential loss of state funding such as the steep grants. Specifically, Section 823 of the Connecticut General Statute requires each municipality to adopt a plan of conservation and development at least once every 10 years. Section 3 of the Public Act 07-239 makes municipalities potentially ineligible to receive discretionary state funding such as STEEP. Effective July 1st, 2010, if the municipality is not in compliance with the 10-year POC update requirement. As stated in Article 16, Section 1601, we are required to have a meeting, public or private, at your discretion. We would like to set this date as May 7th, 2008, 7 p.m. in the P. Francis Hicks Room. Please consider yourself suspended from the Planning and Zoning Commission pending the outcome of this.
That was Mayor Fracasso at the Board of Selectmen meeting for George Clausen's public hearing on his removal. The mayor was reading the initial letter to Clausen verbatim at the beginning of the public meeting on May 7th, 2008. There were about 100 people there, mostly supporters of George Clausen and mostly, in one way or another, Indocrats. I did ask a few people why they were there, and they said, oh, because my wife or my husband asked me to come. Do you know what's going to happen here or what's going on? Oh, no, we just came along with our wife or husband. Now, most of the people were there in earnest because they were supporters of the Indocrats and George Clausen, and they were organized to a certain extent. I will now introduce the next clip with Mayor Fracasso at the George Clausen removal public hearing. The mayor is answering a Clausen attorney question stating no new plan on May 7th, 2008.
The basis is extremely simple, and I don't understand why you can't see it. We do not have a new plan. We do not have an amended plan. We have the same thing we've had for the last 14 years. Therefore, we have not updated or made a new plan. So therefore, we are out of compliance. Therefore, that is why I've asked for his dismissal, because we do not have a plan, and there's nothing that's going on here that says we're going to have one.
All right, now the next clip is again Mayor Fracasso speaking at the Clausen removal public hearing. You can see the other selectmen there as well. This is a united team in this respect, very, very determined, and they have resolved because they know how important that this is to our town, and it needs to get done, and it needs to get done by that June date in 2010.
The problem that we have here, Jeff started to touch on a little bit. We gave you roughly $15,000 in January. There's another $15,000 in the budget. I think we're all but guaranteed at least $25,000. So there's $55,000 that we have available that you can start something with. You stated that if you go to a professional, it's going to take approximately 18 months. So if we have $55,000 now, and it's going to take 18 months, we have 18 more months to fund another $55,000 or $60,000 that would get us home. So where I'm going with this is, if we can't make an amendment to our present plan and move forward, I think that's the only reasonable way we have to do this, because there's no way that you're going to appropriate $110,000 at this point in the game when, you know, we have so much trouble passing budgets in this town, and there's other things that need to be addressed. This is the only logical way, in our mind, that this could be done.
Okay, now you're going to hear just a little bit from Bernie Jacks, who was the attorney for P&Z Hazard, representing the 5 selectmen in the Clausen lawsuit. It's Clausen's removal public hearing again on May 7, 2008, and Attorney Jacks is questioning Clausen about accountability for the absence of an updated plan of conservation and development.
Is not in compliance, correct, sir?
That's correct.
Okay. And there's no doubt, but you have some responsibility for that, and have had some responsibility since December '04?
No.
All right. When were you on the board?
I got on the board in 97.
Okay. So you've been on since '97. And how long you've been chairman?
Since the first meeting in December of 2005.
Okay. And the plan is not in compliance. So isn't it fair to say, sir, that somebody should be held accountable for that?
Now we're going to go from that meeting, the Clausen removal public hearing on May 7, 2008, to
Clausen from the town.
To September 15th, 2008, where Mayor Fracasso is at a Board of Selectmen meeting. The mayor is reading the legal letter from attorneys Pepe and Hazard.
Commission, and he filed a lawsuit claiming his removal violated his rights to hold public position. Mr. Clausen initially claimed that his removal was in violation of state law, and he sought injunctive relief. He also claimed the members of Board of Selectmen defamed him in their comments about his performance as a member of the Town Planning and Zoning. In addition, Mr. Clausen filed a quo warranto action, which is a claim that a public official has been wrongfully removed from his office. Typically, when a plaintiff files a lawsuit in Connecticut, the plaintiff does so by filing and then serving a summons and complaint, which puts the defendant or defendants on notice of the lawsuit and provides them with an opportunity to respond. Upon filing a lawsuit, the case is assigned a return date by which the defendant or defendants must put an appearance, which simply means they have an attorney file a piece of paper on behalf of the defendant. After filing this piece of paper appearance, the defendant has 30 days to respond. Depending on how the complaint is written, the defendant may file a motion to dismiss the complaint because it has a legal flaw, or they may ask to have the complaint revised. This process takes several months. However, this lawsuit is not typical. Mr. Clausen sought injunctive relief. Simply stated, injunctive relief is a request that the court issue an order. In this case, Mr. Clausen asked the court to order the town to reinstate him to his position on planning and zoning. By filing a request for injunctive relief, Mr. Clausen was seeking to speed up the lawsuit because, as a practical matter, a hearing for injunctive relief will occur sooner and would take to resolve the lawsuit itself. Mr. Clausen also effectively forced the town into incur legal fees that otherwise would not have been incurred. The town has a liability insurance policy that covers many different kinds of claims. However, by its express terms, it does not cover requests for injunctive relief. Therefore, when Mr. Clausen filed his claim for injunctive relief, he effectively forced the town to hire an attorney to defend his demand. Had Mr. Clausen simply filed a lawsuit, the town's insurance carrier would have covered all the legal expense and there would have been no additional cost to the town. In addition to forcing the town to incur legal expense that otherwise would not have incurred, Mr. Clausen's request for injunctive relief was odd because it was well established in Connecticut that a public official removed from office, such as Mr. Clausen, is not entitled to injunctive relief. Nevertheless, despite widespread legal authority undercutting his position, Mr. Clausen sought injunctive relief, and a hearing was scheduled. After the hearing was scheduled, but before it was held, the town's attorney asked Mr. Clausen to postpone the hearing so that the parties could try to work out a schedule that would minimize costs, including legal fees. Mr. Clausen refused to do so. However, on the day of the hearing, when Mr. Clausen was given an opportunity to present his case for injunctive relief, he asked the court to adjourn the hearing to give him more time to prepare his case. Attorneys from the town argued that Mr. Clausen was not entitled to injunctive relief and he had cited the wrong statute in his complaint. Mr. Clausen argued that he needed more time to review the cases upon which the town's attorneys had relied, all of which had been decided years before, and all with which should have been familiar. The court granted Mr. Clausen's request and gave him additional time to respond to the town's attorneys. A new hearing was scheduled. Before the new hearing was held, Mr. Clausen amended his complaint and offered a different legal theory. He abandoned his reliance on a state statute. As the town's attorneys correctly noted, the statute upon Mr. Clausen relied did not apply to municipalities. Implicitly admitting that he relied on the wrong statute, Mr. Clausen abandoned one claim and then offered a completely different new theory. He claimed that his constitutional rights had been violated when the town removed him from the P&Z. A second hearing was scheduled and held. However, when the judge did not rule on Mr. Clausen's request for injunctive relief, but rather took the matter under advisement, the town's attorney moved the case to federal court. Within 24 hours of removal to federal court, the judge to whom the case was assigned, Judge Bryant, issued a ruling denying injunctive relief. Judge Bryant's quick action was a ratification of the position of the town's attorneys, which had taken throughout the litigation. Instead of accepting the court's decision, Mr. Clausen filed a motion asking the judge to reconsider. Although federal court rules provide that a party asking for reconsideration must provide the court with either a new case law, Mr. Clausen did not. But by filing the motion for reconsideration, Mr. Clausen forced the town to respond again costing the town more money. Predictably, the court denied this motion for reconsideration, noting that Mr. Clausen had provided nothing new in his motion. Thus, Mr. Clausen's request for injunctive relief effectively forced the town to attend 2 hearings and several motions, only to reach the conclusion that Mr. Clausen had no legal basis for his claim. Unfortunately, one party in a lawsuit can often force the other party to spend money litigating a claim, even a claim of dubious merit, such as Mr. Clausen's claim for injunctive relief. After Mr. Clausen's claim for injunctive relief was denied a second time by the federal judge, he amended his complaint once again, implicitly conceding that he had no basis for his claim for defamation, Mr. Clausen decided to drop that claim before the town's attorney had a chance to have it dismissed. I understand that Mr. Clausen believes that he was wrongfully removed from his office with the planning and zoning. His remedy in seeking quo warranto action, by not limiting himself to the only action which is legally available to him, Mr. Clausen has needlessly complicated this lawsuit and forced the town to a situation where it either exceeds its demands for reinstatement or incurs legal fees. Fortunately, much of Mr. Clausen's lawsuit has been stripped or dismissed. The bulk of his remaining claims are covered by the town's insurance, and the town will not incur significant additional expenses at this time. We will move to dismiss Mr. Clausen's constitutional claim, and it is likely the court will dismiss it. In any event, the attorneys retained by the insurance company will be handling the case from this point forward. In summation, it is unfortunate that Mr. Clausen has adopted a litigation strategy that forces the town to either surrender to its demands or incur legal expenses. Had Mr. Clausen been more concerned about the town's financial well-being, almost all legal fees could have been avoided. Had he pursued this case like virtually every other lawsuit filed in Connecticut, the town's insurance carrier would have covered all legal expenses. Very truly, Ben Jacks, Pepin Avenue.
Okay, the next clip is a follow-up to that at the same meeting, September 15, 2008, with Mayor Fracasso at the Board of Selectmen meeting, reading the Connecticut Interlocal Risk Management, that's our insurance agency, CIRMA. He's reading their attorney's letter. The law firm that they use is Howd and Ludoff.
Tonight, we've had it on file here for a while. It's from the town's attorneys that from CIRMA, our insurance carrier. This office has been retained by CIRMA to defend you in the above entitled matter. Since we have entered an appearance on your behalf, it will not be necessary to appear in court at this time. From time to time, our office may be in touch with you to discuss the various aspects of this case. In the meantime, please do not discuss this matter with anyone except a representative of your insurance carrier or of this office. If anyone makes inquiries, please refer them to us. Attorney Catherine E. Rule and I will be working directly on this case. Please feel free to contact us at any time to further discuss the case. Thank you for your cooperation and assistance. Very truly yours, Thomas Gerard from Howd and Ludorf, who are the insurance
the insurance attorneys, and they're still working on the case. Now, you can see by that clip that these Republican selectmen were put at a great disadvantage over the year or so because they couldn't speak about this case. Meanwhile, everybody else was out raising all kinds of complaints and innuendos and screaming, yelling, and, you know, jumping up and down. But the Republicans were under directions not to speak. So you really haven't heard their side of the story, except what you're hearing tonight. If you want to, and of course it was on all those meetings if you had paid attention to those, if you want to hear it, tune into their Thursday night 8 o'clock Republican campaign and call them in and ask them any questions that you might want to ask, and do the same with all the other parties. Basically boils down to the other parties yelling and screaming that it was costing the town too much, even though it wasn't the selectmen who raised the lawsuit, and basically kind of a vendetta against these 5 Republicans for winning the last election. I will now introduce the next clip, which is, again, Mayor Fracasso at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and September 15, 2008, the selectmen are voting on reinstating Clausen. The vote was 5-2. It was raised by the 2 Democrats. They put an item on the agenda to reinstate George Clausen.
I also...
I don't see how we can...
Opposed? Motion fails 4-2.
We're going to go back to the board here, and I'm going to go over my epilogue of what's happened since those clips. And the epilogue, Dave, if you got it on, okay. The epilogue is, since then, and a lot has happened over the year, and you've heard a lot about it and read about it, and you can read about it by going to that internet address for the registered citizen and just asking any question and put in any name or any subject, and you should be able to get articles up there. I'm not sure the Republican American has the same thing, but you can find out for yourself. You don't have to believe anybody else, but you can see that there was a lot of people concerned about this, and mainly the supporters of the Indocrats and Democrats. The Republicans have funded the POCD, as you heard on the tape, and stood their ground. They still have stood their ground. And this is businessman's resolve. When they know something is critical, on the critical path, and they ran for office saying they would fix that problem, then they did what they thought was necessary to fix the problem. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the legal situation is. That is continuing now. And I'm just looking at the business aspects here, planning for success. And as far as I'm concerned, they've done a wonderful job on this POCD issue to date. The state has added $25,000. I'm not exactly sure whether it's 20 or 25,000, but somewhere in that neighborhood. They've added that amount to the 30 or so that the Republicans agreed in budgets and the rest of the Board of Selectmen. So this Board of Selectmen is the first in probably 10 years or more to really put some money into funding the POCD. The last board, which was the Indocrats, they didn't do much at all in this area, and you heard the Barbara Wilkes clip. They thought it was going better than it was. I know they ran into a lot of trouble along the way, but basically they got nothing done. So these guys, in the time they've been in, have done a lot, and from a business viewpoint, I really respect them, and I think they're doing a darn good job for you in the community. The cost to the town, since the Republicans took this action, replace the planning and zoning chairman, the cost to the town will be about 1/2, a little more, maybe a little less, than the estimated cost projected in the clip. They got in the Planning and Zoning Commission got in some 3 or 4 bidders or more maybe, and they chose a vendor to work on this POCD with the money that was given to them by the state and the town. The Water and Sewer Commission is submitting its updated plan to the state for adoption. That's the water and sewer part of the POCD plan, and the state has been pushing the Water and Sewer Commission to get the stuff into them by this month, September 15th or so. I don't know if it's in there or not, but it's on its way. They, in turn, encourage the rest of the town to contribute to that plan. The POCD subcommittee had many changes they wanted. A lot of them did not get into the plan, but that has progressed. And again, that's, thanks to the state, the town, and the Water and Sewer Commission for pushing that and forcing it to happen. And we need that, of course, for those developments along the corridor once the session is over and things get moving there again. The Clausen lawsuit is waning, as you heard on the tape, and still continuing to cost the town and Clausen supporters money. Our insurance is carrying most of the burden of the payment now for us, KERMA. But usually if it costs too much from insurance companies, then sooner or later they may raise your rates. So we don't want to see that happen. But on the other hand, we have to do what's best for the community, and we have to get this POCD done. The latest planning, we've had 2 planning and zoning chairmen since George Clausen. The latest planning and zoning chairman, James Roberts, is doing a fine job, in my opinion. I don't always agree with James, but he's a good businessman. He has a sense of urgency. He wants to get things moving. He wants to be fair, and he wants to balance POCD as a result, and he wants to do it on time. And I don't think James will accept no for an answer on this. I do know that just about the time when this brouhaha started, James wrote his own plan of conservation and development. He was on the commission at the time, Planning and Zoning Commission. And he put it up on the internet. I took it off the internet, printed out a few copies, and gave them to other people in town who know quite a bit about, and other towns too, about planning and zoning and POCDs. One of whom was Tony Canavo, who was chairman of that commission for many years and tried to do the job in the past in-house, but for one reason or another didn't get done. But anyway, everybody I gave it to had positive feedback. Nobody thought it was perfect. Nobody thought it was going to be going too much in the wrong direction. Most people thought it was going in the right direction, and a great sense of urgency and sense of destination was put into this group by James Roberts. Now, he did have some assistance. This had a bit of a good spin-off because George Clausen was in free. He didn't have to manage planning and zoning anymore because he wasn't there. So the Planning and Zoning Commission put him in charge of the POCD subcommittee. Now that's good and bad because he had plenty of free time to work on it because he didn't have to work on the planning and zoning anymore. He also had a lot of knowledge he's gained over the years, 10 or 12 years in planning and zoning and in working around town. So it was helpful there. The one thing I didn't like about what he did, and we all have to as a town watch very closely, he packed the subcommittee with Indocrats and extreme conversationalists, conservationists, and some regular, normal, middle of the distribution curve conservationists. So I think it's a little bit too left bias for me in that respect. So I think over the next year or two, we're going to have to watch that POCD and the coming regulations very closely to make sure they're fair and balanced when they happen. So James Roberts has given a very positive sense of direction and sense of urgency to the POCD and its subcommittee. There is a meeting open to the public of the POCD subcommittee on Saturday, September 26, 2009. I did go to one of their previous subcommittee meetings. I'm not sure I'll make it this time, but I did go to one, and it was interesting to say the least. So it'll be Saturday, that's this Saturday, September 26, 2009, from 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. in the town hall, the Hicks room in the town hall, unless they overflow it and have to do something different. And the subcommittee, the leader of that is George, will present a draft of the POCD. I'm sure James Roberts will be there, and other commissioners will be there, and there'll be people from other commissions there, water and sewer and in the wetlands and places like that. So there'll be people there for that, and I think you'll find it very interesting if you go, and I'm sure somebody will videotape it and putting on Channel 13. If that happens, I'd advise you all to watch it. The POCD will soon be submitted to a public hearing and the Board of Selectmen for approval, and then on to the county and state for comments, etc., and adoption, the thing we've been waiting for, and the thing that has to be done by June 2010. By the way, this part of the process takes a while because you're dealing with the state here in Litchfield County and Board of Elected Officials or whoever watches it from there. So that stuff takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But we're on our way there, and we need to thank James for all the work he's done and the 5 Republican selectmen. The Republicans and James Roberts, and I watch this very closely. I read all the minutes, and I watch everything very closely here, deserve the credit for the impending success, not the Indocrats. The Indocrats did almost nothing when they were in power to make this thing move along. Matter of fact, my view is I think they were dragging their feet, and they may or may not have been dragging their feet on purpose. So the Indocrats and their supporters procrastinated and did not fund the effort. It did not support the expedition of its adoption. Now, I can say that about previous boards, too. They're not lily white on this, no matter what their composure was. But for one reason or another, the previous people in there, including George, they were all victims of not getting the funding. But now let me just tell you, when a decision is made, like the decision that the Republicans made in 2008, then people find a way to get it done. They go out and get the 30 people they need to help. They look at ways to do things quicker and faster. They have more and I know James Roberts, I don't know him personally, but I know him from meetings, he focuses them. And he wants to know exactly what they're going to do in each meeting, and then he wants to know what they did in each meeting, and he wants to keep them focused. And I've heard him say it over and over again in planning and zoning meetings, and I commend him for that. That's what a good chairman should do. That's what a good project manager should do. That's what a good citizen should do to get this thing done. They make sure we get it out of the way, and then it won't be controversial anymore. The next controversy will come when they start to change the regulations. We'll have to watch that very carefully. Now I want to give you Brian's view, some of which I probably already stated. My view is very simple, as usual. I always have simple views. Clausen, as a leader, should not have sued his town, like my mother advised me. I've never sued my town. And his fellow taxpayers, including extended family members probably, because they have to pay for the town's defense of these selectmen. In my view, a good businessman and George Clausen should have left quietly and not made such a political, or contributed to such a political outcome that we've had over the last year and a half, which has done not much good to help the town. Meanwhile, though, the Republicans, selectmen, and James Roberts plowed ahead. They're getting the job done. They're not letting the flack stop them. And that's what's good about them. That's what I like about them, and that's what leaders should do. Clausen, in my opinion, and this is just Brian's opinion, he might still win the legal battle. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a businessman. And we take a lot of risk in business. But Clausen, in my opinion, displayed questionable management judgment from my point of view and from the Republican selectmen's point of view throughout the years on the POCD issue. He's not the only one. A lot of people did. But it all came to a head when these Republican businessmen got elected, and in their platform they said they would try to get us more revenue into town. And unfortunately, this POCD resolution was necessary to do that for the water and sewer down the corridor and for the adoption by the state. There are different views on this whole approach. Clausen shouldn't run for selectman, in my opinion. Shouldn't run for selectman until the matter is cleared up. Why would you want to elect a selectman who's suing the town with his supporters backing him and waving signs and yelling and screaming at meetings? Why would you want to do that? What if he gets in? How's he going to get along with these people he's suing? How on earth is he going to be objective and not tend to have a vendetta, which we always hear that some of these Democrats have vendettas. They almost seem to have chosen people to run for this election that have vendettas against somebody, either the rec board or the selectmen or whatever. That's not good. We don't want, now people profess to say they want to get along with everybody and they want to be trusted, but I don't think that's true here in the case of the Indocrats and the good half. I call that the bad half of the Democratic Party. The good half of the Democratic Party are the fair-minded, well-balanced Democrats that want to see the town succeed without letting their egos get in the way. Clausen is quoted in the newspapers as saying that if he is elected and also wins his lawsuit, he would step down from one of those panels. Those panels, this wasn't in the paper, but they are the Board of Selectmen or the Planning and Zoning Commission if he should win his lawsuit, which I don't think he's got a hope in winning. He might win it. I wouldn't put any money on it. But if he wins it, then he would have a choice to stay. If he won the Board of Selectmen, he would have a choice between that and Planning and Zoning. Now, if he won the Board of Selectmen and he went to Planning and Zoning, then we would get somebody in the Selectmen that we didn't vote in, most likely. It would be one of the losers, or it might even be one of the Democratic Party Indocrats that lost in the last election by a landslide. So we don't want to take that chance. Don't vote for anybody who says when they get in, they might want to move. Now remember, the Indocrats last time voted in one person. 3 months later, he handed off to another Indocrat that didn't win in the election. Now George says he doesn't know which one he's going to choose. Well, that's kind of interesting. That's indecision as far as I'm concerned. But I don't think he should have made that statement at all running for election. Now, I only got it out of the newspaper. I didn't see any retraction in there about it anywhere. So I assume that's probably what he said. On February 23rd, 2009, Clausen was reported as saying that he wouldn't run for office and saying that he has no intention of running for a seat on the Board of Selectmen and that he is a planning and zoning guy. On July 15th, the Democrats announced that Clausen was running on their ticket as a Democrat for a seat on the Board of Selectmen. Again, wishy-washy, indecision, say one thing, mean another, say one thing, do another. Now, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but other people have said they weren't going to run for election. I was one of them. Another Indocrat said the same sort of thing, and they stuck by their guns. Let's just hope they don't show up if George Clausen wins and steps down to Planning and Zoning. Let's hope they don't show up again on the Board of Selectmen. I seem to remember that Clausen was reported in the paper, I couldn't find a clip, but I will keep looking for it, as saying that the Democratic Party needs rebuilding. Now, why would you vote for a party that needs rebuilding? I don't want any party to be rebuilding on my money, on my tax money, and you shouldn't either. The voters can end this Indocrat Clausen nonsense. They're supporting George Clausen, the Indocrats and the Democrats, and some Republicans and some independents are also supporting him. But we can end that nonsense now by continuing with the Republicans in the majority at the coming election and not voting for Clausen because he is at odds with the present town leaders and the vengeance that the Indocrats have been and are still seeking is always a possibility. Leopards don't change their spots. It's hard to turn over a new leaf when you're in your 60s, so don't expect too much. We don't need this kind of behavior in our Board of Selectmen. In addition, he is running as a Democrat. And the Democrats are tax and spenders. That's the big bond issue. Remember last time? And are against the major developments that the town has permitted down the northeast corridor. They'll tell you that they've got their permits, but that doesn't mean they're not trying one way or another to slow them down in getting into this town. They spent almost $10 million, I'm told, in trying to get into Winsted after being encouraged by the Winsted town leaders of that day. The Indocrats, led by the ex-Winchester Party members, their supporters, and fellow Indocrat Althea Perez, continue to taunt the town manager, and Clausen is supported by that group. My view is the town manager is very good. I'm going to show you a program here in a week or two, an excellent program done by EDC, the EDC Commission, where the town manager shines. Very, very good. You can see it for yourself when I play it. Let George resolve his lawsuit and help rebuild the Democratic Party on his own time and on his own nickel. Let's end this nonsense. Do not vote for Clausen or his party, supported by the Indocrats, if you want peace and prosperity in the near future. Thank you. I'll be back again next week where I think I'll talk about the remainder of the Democrats. Now you will see a poster before and after poster of the Democratic candidates, and then we will end the program. Order and stimulator of George Clausen.
Zoning, and they are currently working on their 10-year plan of conservation and development, and they have an optimistic date for completion in December of 2006. While the plan was due in 2004, it is a multi-year process to complete. The reason this plan of conservation and development is important is because unless you have it in place, or if a plan is not in place, you can be denied state funding. So I'm glad to see, and I think Russ can attest to it, that some significant work has been is being applied to that.
The basis is extremely simple, and I don't understand why you can't see it. We do not have a new plan. We do not have an amended plan. We have the same thing we've had for the last 14 years. Therefore, we have not updated or made a new plan. So therefore, we are out of compliance. Therefore, that is why I've asked for his dismissal, because we do not have a plan, and there's nothing that's going on here that says we're going to have one.
Well,